Welcome to Both Sides of the Story. I'm your host, Alan Janae from CBS 4. Thank you for joining us. Now, our special high school debate series returns here, challenging our students and our viewers to look at important Colorado issues from both sides. Each student will offer a case, ask and answer questions of their opponent, and offer rebuttal. We'll also feature an expert judging panel that will chime in with questions of their own. Now, both of our students have prepared a pro and a con case for tonight's debate topic, and they won't know which side they'll defend until we have a coin flip right here in our studio. Now, we've added a brand new element this year. A winner will be chosen from each school, then we'll go on to compete in the semifinals. Then we will ultimately name a both sides of the story champ. So be sure and watch throughout the season as each of our winners are named, and get ready to move on through the tournament. On tonight's show, students from Denver East High School's forensics team kicks off the series. DEFT, as they're known, ranked top 10 in the nation for both speech and debate at this year's national competition. Let's meet our participants now. First up is Max Donovan. He is a senior at East High, and this will be his fourth and final year competing with DEFT. He is a team leader in many ways, and he's responsible for training new debaters. Little known fact about Max, he has an interest in Japanese culture, and he speaks a little bit of its language. Next, we have Jack Cohen. He is head captain of East Debate Team and is a public forum debater. He loves skiing, hiking, and helps run the constitutional law program for middle schoolers. So, gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Also joining us is our panel of experts who will offer their analysis of the debate today. They are Dominic Dezzutti, host of Colorado Decides, the election debate series produced in conjunction with CBS 4. And next to him is Susan McHugh, the debate coach of the Denver East forensics team. Now, before we get started, let's learn why Jack decided to join the team.
I joined this debate team because I think that argumentation and critical thinking is really important, not just to high school debate, but to life in general. When I'm getting ready to compete, I feel 50% nervous and 50% really excited. The nerves come from the fact that you never fully know what you're going to experience when you get into a debate round. You never know what your arguments your opponents are going to run or how they're going to respond to the arguments that you've been running. But it's also a lot of excitement because it's something I really love to do. It's a really fun activity, and it's really exciting to be able to get in a round and hear a set of arguments and know how to poke holes in them, know how to refute them, and to be able to effectively communicate all of that to your judge.
All of that a challenge. Jack, by the way, considering Berkeley and Puget Sound when he heads to college next year. Now, Max shares the benefits he gets from competing with the Denver East forensics team.
What attracted me to the speech and debate arena was the group of people who are devoutly interested in a somewhat niche group of topic areas. Debate has helped me as an individual going forward because it's helped me hone in on a specific interest of mine. I really didn't know that I had this distinct interest in politics, philosophy, and history, but after being exposed to those sort of things and having a support around that, I really think that I would like to pursue an academically rigorous future in those fields.
All right, to get things started, I want to set the ground rules. Each side will present their case, ask each other questions, and have a chance to offer rebuttals. When it's finished, we'll go to our illustrious panel for their own questions and find out who they felt offered the best arguments. I will be a tiebreaker in case of a tie. So let's get started. The issue up for debate today is, should Colorado citizens have the right to medically assisted suicide? So want to have our coin flip and get things underway. Max, I'm going to bring you out here because you, as the person to my right, gets the choice on the coin toss. Heads or tails?
Heads.
Tails we have. All right. Jack, you get to choose. Do you want to be pro or con?
I will be pro.
Okay. Proponent goes first. So let's begin right now with Jack. Here he is.
I affirm today's resolution. Colorado citizens should have the right to medically assisted suicide. First, it's important to understand the exact definition of medically assisted suicide. Northwestern University provides this, telling you that medically assisted suicide is where the physician provides the necessary information and means, but the patient performs the act. This leaves control of the final decision in the hands of the patient and is never an autonomous decision made by the physician. I affirm today's resolution for 3 reasons. First, medically assisted suicide provides dignity to patients. When it comes to patients with terminal illnesses who have no medical chance of survival beyond 6 months, medically assisted suicide can provide much needed relief. Helen Starks, a PhD at the University of Washington, explains that suffering means more than pain. There are other physical, existential, social, and psychological burdens, such as the loss of independence, loss of sense of self, and functional capabilities that some patients feel jeopardize their dignity. It is not always possible to relieve suffering, and medically assisted suicide may be a compassionate response to this extreme suffering. We've also seen other states, including California, pass similar measures. Governor Jerry Brown explained as he signed California's bill, "I do not know what I would do if I were dying in prolonged and excruciating pain. I am certain, however, that it would be a comfort to be able to consider the options afforded by assisted suicide. And I wouldn't deny that right to others." Finally, Time magazine explains that this does not take away end-of-life care for other patients. This is important because it means that this right does not take anything away from those who do not want to choose this path. By giving patients the right to consider medically assisted suicide, we give them the right to make the choice that they feel is best for them. Second, public opinion supports medically assisted suicide. According to a nationwide Gallup poll, 7 out of 10 Americans support, quote, physicians being allowed to end a patient's life through painless means. As we consider whether or not we should grant this right, it's imperative to consider what the public wants. If over 2/3 of Americans support this, they should at least have the right for it to be an option. Finally, creating clear legislation around medically assisted suicide provides essential safeguards. Emily Barone from Time magazine writes that states that don't authorize aid in dying have unclear and unenforceable laws. An underground practice has absolutely no safeguards. An authorized practice, on the other hand, facilitates transparency and provides safeguards such as mandatory reporting as well as state oversight. When states do not legalize medically assisted suicide, people still choose to end their lives. They just have to do it by themselves, hiding it from their friends and family. Mother Jones tells the story of a man, referred to as Harry, who was forced to end his own life after he feared he would no longer be able to be physically in control of his own destiny. Because assisted suicide was illegal in California, he couldn't tell his doctor or his family and was isolated from those closest to him in his final moments. In order to stop tragedies like this from happening, we should make the process more regulated and transparent. For these reasons, I affirm. Thank you.
Jack, thank you very much. Max, now you have 2 minutes for any questions in cross-examination. Go ahead.
I have a question about end-of-life care that you mentioned. Do we have the drugs and the means in our current society to provide comfortable living in those last 6 months?
Absolutely. And while situations aren't essential, it's important to remember that this is a choice. And if Colorado citizens choose not to use the medically assisted suicide option, that's okay because they still have that option to remain in end-of-life care until they die naturally.
Okay, so if we have sufficient end-of-life care, why is it promoting the human dignity of those people to end their lives early if they can live the last 6 months comfortably?
It's important to remember while this end-of-life care is sufficient for keeping patients fairly comfortable, some think that they would be even more comfortable choosing to end their life early. Additionally, I support the position that Colorado citizens should have the right to choose what they want to do with their own medical decisions, and this would be one avenue to ensuring that that's possible.
Okay, so if Colorado citizens are allowed to make their own medical decisions as radical as life and death, should it be limited to only terminally ill patients?
I mean, I don't think that's my place to determine whether or not we should only limit it to terminally ill patients. I think that's a great place to start because it can promote the efficacy of these programs. Additionally, it's important to remember that under-the-table programs are a lot more dangerous, and this would help to solve that by instituting regulation.
Let's discuss under-the-table programs. You mentioned the restrictions that are put on medically assisted suicide. What are those restrictions?
Are you talking about?
Regulations, sorry.
Right, so these regulations would be really important because when we legalize something, we bring it into the light of the law, which means that doctors actually know the policies and programs behind it. These vary by state to state, but for example, in California, when it was illegal when medically assisted suicide was illegal, certain handbooks informed patients that they couldn't tell anybody of their decision to commit suicide, otherwise those people could be held criminally liable.
Would doctors be required to administer or to prescribe these drugs if their patients were to ask for them?
Not necessarily. A patient would need 2 doctors to support them, but if one doctor didn't want to support them, they could just go to a different doctor.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Right now, Max, the floor is yours for the con side for 3 minutes.
All right. I negate the resolved. Colorado citizens should have the right to medically assisted suicide. Medically assisted suicide is defined as a physician knowingly and intentionally providing a person with the knowledge and the means required to commit suicide.
The most important thing to focus on for this debate is the ethical dilemma facing healthcare professionals. Because medically assisted suicide laws don't force citizens to commit suicide, but it does force those in the healthcare industry to be complicit in a death or lose their job. They are the population that is most directly involved with the decision. Contention 1 is the ethical dilemma. Doctors are often motivated to become involved in healthcare by a desire to heal people, to help their patients. That desire is at the very core of the profession. The Hippocratic Oath that all doctors take at the outset of their careers states, "I will not administer poison to anyone where asked, and I will be of benefit or at least to do no harm." These words, however formal, have value in the hearts of medical professionals. Allowing medically assisted suicide radically changes their job description. While my opponent may argue that medically assisted suicide is in a way helping patients, that line is too blurry and the consequences too extreme for many physicians. As a society, it is not fair for Coloradans to ask our healers to be directly active or at the very least complicit in the death of a human. Linking the archaic duty of the executioner in any way to the modern medical practice is a problem for individuals in the industry. That line becomes even blurrier when the possible circumstances surrounding medically assisted suicide are explored. Medically assisted suicide is too vague a term to limit it to specific situations, and even if you look at exclusively terminally ill patients, requests for assisted suicide are abundantly higher in those with depression. According to the Journal of Clinical Oncology, recent studies among terminally ill patients found that a desire for a hastened death or an interest in assisted suicide was associated with depression. It has therefore been suggested that a request for euthanasia may be a symptom of depression. Patients may not wish to continue living due to judgment clouded by depression. Not only are you asking doctors to assist in the death of an individual, but also that individual may not be considering all of the factors as a result of their depression. It is not right to force physicians to assist in the suicide of a mentally ill patient or in the death of any patient at all. To ask doctors to make these kind of ethically gray decisions is immoral for Coloradans. Therefore, Colorado citizens should not have the right to medically assisted suicide.
All right, Max, thank you very much. Now, Jack, you have 2 minutes for questions. Have at it.
Thanks. So I guess my first question refers to the Hippocratic Oath argument you made. If doctors are able to relieve pain, how are they harming their patients?
The issue is that it is a morally gray area. While some doctors may feel like they're helping their patients, others might come to the conclusion that by prescribing this cocktail of lethal drugs, they are in fact complicit in the death of their patients. Whereas you can allow a patient to die over those 6 months is not as morally gray because they are omitting rather than acting against their patient.
So you brought this up the last time we talked, and I think it's important. Can't doctors choose not to do this and have a patient simply go to another doctor who is more comfortable doing this?
My issue with that is that it's an issue of coercion. If somebody comes up to you and says your money or your life, that is technically a decision, right? But you don't have one. You're going to lose that patient. And furthermore, the fact that the doctor gets asked at all is an issue, because then they have to look their patient in the eye, someone who is suffering, and tell them no for personal reasons rather than for a legal obligation.
Okay, so let's talk about your second point where you talk about depression. Aren't mental health evaluations helpful in reducing this issue?
The main issue with this argument is that it's almost impossible to tell the difference between someone who is actually clinically depressed and someone who has just been diagnosed with a terminal illness. They show similar symptoms. Obviously, these people are seeking death. And so the issue is whether that is taking into account all of the factors, being the length of their life and the quality, rather than the actual depression that is acting on their brain.
Yeah, so why shouldn't we institute regulation that would help us address these issues better instead of having a lot of these people who are depressed and still want to commit suicide just doing it without the consent of their doctor?
I would say it's almost impossible to tell the difference. That's the issue, is that there are systems in place, and I don't believe that there are systems that could be improved. You have to essentially treat depression to be able to access a moral world here.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, Jack, now you have 2 minutes for a rebuttal. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about my opponent's first argument, where he talks about the Hippocratic Oath. The issue here is that doctors actually aren't going to be going against most of their moral beliefs because they're going to be able to ensure comfort for their patients. When it comes to the Hippocratic Oath, as long as doctors are still ensuring comfort for their patients, something that patients are asking for, it's still okay. Additionally, remember the fact that we talked about this in Crossfire. It's okay if doctors don't want to institute or don't want to give their patients the opportunity to commit medically assisted suicide. If the doctor says no, a patient can find another doctor, which means that this moral obligation isn't necessarily held to the doctor. But then, on his next point about depression, there are a couple things here which are going to be really important to remember. First is that we have a lot of programs to diagnose depression in the status quo. This is really good because it means that when we institute medically assisted suicide, we're still going to be able to catch this depression and actually address it. But then it's also important to remember that when we institute medically assisted suicide, we institute regulation, which is really beneficial because it means that we're going to be regulating these programs and actually ensuring that first, 2 doctors have to sign off on this, and second, we're instituting these mental health evaluations, which are really good. When we institute these mental health evaluations, it means that patients can actually get help if they need it, or doctors can understand that patients aren't depressed and actually understand what they're trying to do and are doing it in sound mind. Overall, it's incredibly important to give choice to Colorado voters, and when we institute a policy that allows them to commit medically assisted suicide if they choose, we still do that, and we don't take anything away from the people who don't want that.
Jack, thank you very much. Max, now you have 3 minutes to respond and close. Go ahead.
All right. First of all, I'd like to address the issue of dignity. So, what my opponent said in cross-examination when asked was that you can still have a comfortable life in those last 6 months, even if you do not choose a medically assisted suicide. Essentially what this means is that patients can live effectively because of modern science, because of modern medicine, and not have to have this medically assisted suicide for the reasons of dignity. So you're going to be dropping that point essentially because they're not losing any dignity by living that last 6 months. Second of all, the end of life care is a livable situation. That is something that my opponent conceded to in cross-examination. Then on public opinion, I have one distinct issue with public opinion, is that while we may be voting on the issue, we are not the ones prescribing the drugs. The doctors are the ones prescribing the drugs. While we may sit here and theoretically say, yes, we'd like to we'd like to alleviate as much pain as possible, we aren't the ones being complicit in that decision. Essentially, what I'm arguing is that the doctors themselves are the ones who have to face that morally gray area, whereas the voters, the voting population in general, does not have to make that decision. So the democratic issue here is not the one most prevalent at hand because we are not in the healthcare industry. And then finally, on the safeguards and this issue of underground, the problem is that the restrictions and the regulations are not working in the status quo. He says we improve those regulations, we get better in terms of like diagnosing depression. The thing is, my opponent is essentially working himself in circles here. By the fact that there are regulations and they are in the status quo, it means that we can address depression without having to go through the regulations of medically assisted suicide, because those simply don't work. When patients are diagnosed with a terminal illness, told that they only have 6 months to live, and they are seeking assisted suicide, it is impossible for a physician, no matter how many there are, or for a psychologist to determine whether that is the result of depression or whether it's the result of their diagnosis, which means that the regulations aren't working. So what I'm asking you to consider today is the fact that the doctors are the ones making the decisions. They're the ones having to prescribe this lethal cocktail of drugs to the individuals and be therefore complicit in their deaths. So essentially, we cannot allow that to be a personal decision, whether they say yes or no, because they're looking at a sickly patient in the eye and telling them, I can't help you because I don't ethically believe in this. They're having to make these impossible decisions because we're voting and making them make those decisions. So they should not have the right to medically assisted suicide.
Max, thank you very much. And Jack, finally, your 1 minute close.
Awesome. So my opponent's first point about doctor morality, remember the fact that doctors can still choose not to give their patients the opportunity to commit medically assisted suicide. If they feel morally against it, patients can go to a different doctor and still get those same opportunities. But then on the argument about depression, it's important to remember that while he says that status quo programs work, safeguards ensure clarity, regulation ensures proper care. When we have this opportunity, it means that we're opening the possibility up to have these discussions about depression, and we can use the current systems to apply it to medically assisted suicide. But then, dignity is an incredibly important point in this round, because it's not good enough in certain situations when we come to end-of-life care. While it's livable, it might not be the ideal situation. The point of this argument is that some patients might choose end-of-life care, and that's their choice, and some patients might choose to end their life, and that's also their choice. We should at least give them the option. But then finally, this underground suicides are also really bad because people are still committing suicide in the status quo. It's just not medically assisted, which means it's more dangerous and it hurts families and doctors. So overall, we should give Colorado citizens the choice.
Jack, thank you very much. Max, thank you very much. Well done, gentlemen. Now, a great spirited debate. The problem for our panel is picking the winner. Let's get their thoughts on what they saw. Dominic, take it away.
And you're absolutely right. It was a great debate. We're going to offer a couple of questions for each debater. First, I'm going to start off with Jack. You talked about safeguards being created if it was considered legal. But when medical marijuana was passed, that seemed to have safeguards. But you also had shady doctors who weren't really, I mean, they were doctors legally, but they were still making it happen. Isn't that a possible risk in this scenario where you have a deaf doctor who would always say yes?
It is a possible risk, but there are a couple safeguards that have actually been designed to prevent that. For example, 2 doctors must sign off on any medically assisted suicide, which means that even if one doctor makes a bad decision, another could catch it. Additionally, it's also better than in a world where we don't have medically assisted suicide, because that means that every patient in that world is committing suicide without any sort of input from a medical professional.
Susan?
My question is directed to Max, but could be answered by either one of you. Max, you highlighted the potential ethical issues that this brings up for the medical community. And because physician-assisted suicide has been legalized in other states like Washington, Oregon, and California, what has been the medical community's response? And was there a particular outcry against this type of legislation in those states?
Well, as expected, the reaction was diverse because personal ethics are diverse. The issue is that it's applying a law to personal ethics. And so while some doctors were probably voted to pass that law and were happy to be able to alleviate pain because they believed that was the ethically correct decision, others are in fact taking the opt-out decision and believing that they're having harder conversations. And there has been a specific outcry in the nursing and pharmaceutical communities in those states because they are so directly tied to the decision as well.
Let me offer a follow-up for Max, and then we'll have one more for Jack. Max, you talked about the idea of doctors being forced into these decisions that would be against keeping their patient alive. But aren't doctors sometimes already put in a position to where a patient would not want to continue, let's say, chemotherapy, and would simply want to be made comfortable? The doctor isn't doing anything to keep them alive, knows what they would need to do to actually help them heal, but isn't doing it because the patient has decided, I don't want that treatment anymore. Aren't they already in that position?
So that takes me back to the action versus omission distinction. The Hippocratic Oath says that they will benefit or at least do no harm. And so by doing no harm, they may be allowing a patient to die, but they aren't taking an active decision to be complicit in that death.
Jack, question for you. So you talk a lot about liberty and providing more choices for our citizens in the state of Colorado. Do you have concerns, or are there concerns with this new law that there would, along with choice, there would be pressure for patients who are diagnosed with some sort of fatal illness, and that they would feel pressure based on this new option to opt into physician-assisted suicide when that might not be something that they would have seriously considered previous to this law?
Absolutely, and I think pressure would be a really detrimental thing. However, I think both the 2-doctor rule, as well as the fact that the patient must be the one who ultimately takes the drugs or makes the active decision to end his own life, could be a really beneficial way in preventing that. Additionally, I think that this pressure also happens in a world without legal physician-assisted suicide, which can almost make it worse because it means that patients feel like they have to do something on their own without the help of anybody else.
If I could answer that question as well, I actually think that there is, in fact, pressure from another group. The families of those people who are being supported on chemotherapy or kept in some other palliative state. Essentially what is happening is they are burning money in the ultimate decision of their death, which means that families of those people may be making the decision, or at least pressuring those individuals to try to get a medically assisted suicide.
I don't know how they've done it. They actually made our job tougher. So give us a minute and we'll see if we can come up with a winner.
I think it is, and maybe the viewers at home are trying to figure this out as well. Which one do you give the victory to? We're going to give our panel a moment to consider who they felt won this debate. And that gives me a moment to let you know that this is one of 8 different debates we're presenting this season. To check all of them out, you can go to cpt12.org/election. All right, panel. Do you have a decision as difficult as it may be?
Alan, it was a fantastic debate. It was very difficult to come to a decision, but after looking over everything, we felt that Jack had the better argumentation. We agreed with the points put out. While it was, really for us, it was a 51-49 debate. Congratulations, Jack.
Boy, oh boy, that was a close one, wasn't it?
Indeed.
Really tough. Great job by Jack Cohen, also Max Donovan. Congratulations to the both of you for an awesome debate. You gave our viewers a wonderful debate tonight. You both ought to be very proud here. Now, Jack, you're going to go on to compete against the winner from our next school, St. Mary's Academy, coming up on Friday, October 14th. You don't want to miss this matchup. It's all we have time for on our program tonight. I want to thank our excellent students for accepting our challenge and participating in our debate. I also want to thank our esteemed panel for sharing their thoughts. And finally, thank you for tuning in. It's the support of viewers like you and our sponsors that helps make this show a reality. This is the first of 8 episodes of Both Sides of the Story. Next Friday, September 23rd at 9:30 p.m., debaters from St. Mary's High School in Colorado Springs will debate whether Colorado should allow school districts to offer vouchers for private K-12 education. If you are looking for more information about this program or about the Colorado Decides debate series, please go to our website, cpt12.org/election or cbsdenver.com. And you can catch me every morning on CBS 4 for all the latest news and information about this year's election and issues. And for everybody here at Colorado Public Television, I'm Alan Janay. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.